This is Luca Ferrari, CEO of Bending Spoons, during a secret investor presentation. Bending Spoons is an $11 billion business that's 25% Wall Street and 75% Silicon Valley. They bought companies like Evernote, AOL, and Vimeo. In this video, we'll cover what Bending Spoons is, we'll reverse engineer how it actually works and their 4 pillars of success, and finally, explain what it would take for someone to create a competitor today. I've spent over 40 hours researching Bending Spoons and condensed all of my learning into this video that you're about to watch. Let's get started. Bending Spoons has built an $11 billion company doing something incredibly difficult. They've turned operational excellence into their primary competitive advantage. Instead of creating one hit product and capturing lightning in a bottle, what they've done is they've created a factory, a platform that excels at acquiring businesses and radically improving them. But before we understand the platform and how it works, it's important to understand the thesis behind Bending Spoons. When the co-founders of Bending Spoons started the company, they realized that startups can be broadly bucketed into 2 phases. The 0 to 1 phase, which is the chaotic, messy phase, where you're trying to figure out what works, what product you're selling, and to whom, and how to actually sell that. But eventually it gets to a point where you figure that out. And that's the 1 to N phase, where you scale what's working and deliver that product better and to more people. Their fundamental insight was that the 0 to 1 phase relies on a lot of things outside of your control. And what the Bending Spoons model does is it totally outsources this risk and allows other founders and VCs to operate in this area. Instead, once a company has figured out their product and who they're serving, but they've hit a plateau, that's where Bending Spoon comes in, and they help them scale in this 1 to N phase. What they're basically betting here is that the 1 to N phase is based on skill, engineering, and operational excellence, and they've designed their entire Bending Spoons team to be excellent at this. And because of this, they're able to unlock value where other companies have hit a ceiling or hit a plateau. So this philosophy powers a self-reinforcing flywheel. They acquire businesses that have hit a ceiling or hit a plateau, but have untapped alpha. They then transform these businesses by plugging them into their proprietary platform. After they've transformed these businesses start to generate excess cash flow, which they then reinvest into improving the platform and making that better, and also acquiring bigger and bigger targets. As they acquire bigger targets, it requires the same effort to transform them, but they generate even more cash, which allows them to reinvest and acquire even bigger targets. And so this flywheel continues to spin faster and faster. So there are 4 pillars that allow this flywheel to continue spinning. The first one is the acquisition engine. Basically, how do they find and win deals? Second is the transformation playbook. So once they've acquired the companies, what do they actually do to improve them? The platform advantage. What is the proprietary things? Like, how does this transformation actually work? What do they have in terms of technology and people under the hood? And then finally, the people. How does that actually work? How do they think about recruiting to maintain this operational excellence? So first, we'll dive into the acquisition engine. So the first thing to understand is that they operate like a top-tier private equity firm. They source between 3,000 to 5,000 deals every year. So they have a massive funnel. They select a few businesses every year that they actually acquire. And in terms of the things that they look for, they have 3 criteria. The first criteria is that it's digital only. Bending Spoons doesn't work in the physical world. They rely on software and internet businesses because this gives them ultimate leverage. The second criteria is scale. As Bending Spoons has gotten bigger and bigger, what they've realized is a small acquisition is as much work to actually transform the business as a large acquisition. So what that means now is they mainly look at companies in the $50 million to $1 billion range. And this explains why they recently bought AOL and Vimeo. These are 2 massive businesses. These are not companies with $10 million in revenue. And the final thing that they look for is predictability. Wow, predictability is a long word. Predictability and potential for improvement. What they want is to reliably predict how much revenue that these companies are going to make in the future and have a good understanding of the churn. And they also need to be able to underwrite some improvement to the business, because this is how the Bending Spoon model works. They buy the business and then they improve it. And so they need to be able to have a clear line of sight into how they're actually going to be able to do that. And the last thing that you need to know is that they are basically unbeaten on price. And the reason that they're able to compete on price is because they can underwrite this improvement. So if you've run a business and you have competitors, if your LTV, let's say, is $5,000, but the LTV of your competitor is $1,000, you can spend more to acquire customers where they can't. you can spend over $1,000 and you'll still be in the green, whereas your competitors are capped because their LTV is so low. In the same way, the Bending Spoon model relies on a similar principle. Because Bending Spoon's able to improve these businesses more than other people, these businesses are worth more to them than others, and so they're always able to compete on price. The one thing to note is that in negotiations, what they usually do is they use Warren Buffett's principle, which is basically the first and final price. Give them a fair offer up front, and this makes it clear to the people that are selling that, hey, these people are serious and they're willing to do business. So that's just basically the other thing to note about how they price or how they deal with negotiations is they use Warren Buffett's principle, which is basically first and final offer. They do this to save on negotiation time and just be like, hey, we're serious. Here's our number. If you like it, we can go ahead. If not, no worries. And that's basically just their philosophy. So buying the asset is actually just the prologue. Where the meat and the magic of Bending Spoons actually happens is once they've acquired the business and then they go on to improve it. They break this down into two phases. Phase one is a deep dive. They embed product managers, engineers, marketers, all the best talent that they have into the company to work side by side with the team. And the whole goal here is to deeply understand the product, the customers, and how it works. And what they're ultimately aiming for in this phase is to come up with a platonic ideal. What is the best possible version of this product? What could this company become? And once they figured out that, then they move on to phase two. Phase two is the actual execution. So they separate this into distinct parts because they don't want the people that are executing to be bogged down with the vision and be constrained by the fact that, hey, I'm going to be executing on this. Let me not be ambitious in terms of the vision of what this company could be. So they deliberately separate these phases out. In the execution phase, they do a number of things. The first thing is on the technology side. They try and understand what is the tech stack, can we modernize it, if that makes sense, which is especially important now in the age of AI, where a lot of the AI tools, the code generation is better and more reliable at more modern languages, and they think about how to actually improve that. Sometimes they have to rewrite the entire code base to actually speed things up and increase product velocity. The second thing is actually product velocity. What they do is they focus maniacally on what does the customer actually need here, and they try and increase the number of features that actually serve the customers as much as possible. Number three is pricing or monetization and performance. They're not afraid to increase prices because they know that the best customers of these pieces of software are incredibly loyal. And if you increase the quality of the product and the speed, you can also increase pricing because a lot of these people have stuck with the company for a long time and there's probably some sort of moat. So for example, if you're using Evernote, the likelihood is all your years of notes are in there and you're not going to move. So in the case of Evernote, even though they increased prices by roughly 60%, because that improved the actual quality of the product, sync times were better, the speed of the product was better, retention actually improved and churn went down. And the last thing is org restructuring. They're not afraid to lay off people. And sometimes with a smaller, more talent-dense team, you can actually accomplish way more. And this is what Bending Spoons does. That's an overview of their transformation playbook, broken down into two phases. First one is the best possible version of this product and how do we get there? And phase two is actually executing against that by improving the tech stack, improving the product velocity, changing pricing, and also restructuring the org to actually execute on these goals. So this is where we talk about the actual platform advantage. What is Bending Spoon's actual moat? Because a lot of private equity firms say that they can actually do value creation and improve things, but how does Bending Spoons actually do that? So you can break it down into two components. One is the proprietary tech, and the second is fluid resources. Because Bending Spoons is at heart 75% a tech company and 25% a private equity company, they focus a lot on building in-house tools. And so they've built a bunch of in-house tools that make them a lot better at their jobs than a traditional private equity firm would be in terms of value creation. The first example is called Minerva. It's a tool to predict LTV, ad spend, and predict user behavior years into the future. Minerva is basically a crystal ball for LTV. And they use this to predict user behavior years into the future. And what they do is they use this to optimize their ad spend, they use it to optimize their pricing, Another one is Pantheon, which is their ML Ops platform. Allows them to A/B test different models in different products at scale. And then they have a lot of shared infrastructure in terms of payments, A/B testings, features, etc., a lot of which is built in-house. They have this all centralized in terms of this proprietary technology, such that it's way faster and easier whenever they go into a new company or a new product to actually improve it. The most interesting part, perhaps, is Fluid Resources. They treat their talent like liquid. They go to where the highest ROI opportunities are, and they embed these talented people into those companies. So in the same way that Palantir has the forward deployed model, where they deploy engineers to specific enterprise companies, the same thing happens with Bending Spoons, but at their portfolio companies. And this can change pretty rapidly depending on where the highest ROI opportunity actually is at that moment in time. Basically, they kind of have a SWAT team or multiple SWAT teams that they can send into different situations if they see an opportunity, and they can take advantage of it as fast as possible. This basically solves the problem of a lot of companies which are either historically understaffed or overstaffed. In the case of Evernote, they were overstaffed and had too much bloat, and in some cases, you're understaffed and you're not actually spending enough to get the degree of scale that you actually want. And this fluid resource allocation actually helps with that. The fourth pillar that actually makes Bending Spoons work is their talent engine. Unlike most companies which treat recruiting as like an HR function, they focus on recruiting as a core product. So like I mentioned in the platform phase, one of their products is actually a tool for recruiting in terms of finding the best outlier candidates and filtering through them effectively. And what they do is quite unusual in terms of talent. They mainly hire recent graduates. And the reason that they do that is because recent graduates don't come with bad habits from other companies. What they're able to do is they're able to mold them in the Bending Spoons way of actually doing things and have them grow with the company. The other thing that's important to note about Bending Spoons is they're extremely selective. They're more selective than Harvard in terms of the people that they actually accept. For example, in 2024, they had 400,000 applicants for only 100 spots. That is a 0.025% acceptance rate, which is crazy. I think Harvard's acceptance rate is probably close to like 2%. So they're extremely selective. And the reason that they're able to be extremely selective is that they're in Milan, Italy. So Bending Spoons basically has a monopoly on top talent in Europe from all the best universities. The people that are graduating from these colleges and universities are extremely talented, but they don't have the same level of opportunities as they would have if they lived in Silicon Valley or in New York. And so they take advantage of that. When you combine extremely selective process and recent graduates with the Bending Spoons model, what you have in some cases is 23-year-olds, 25-year-olds running companies with $50 million in revenue. And they're able to do this because they have that fluid resource allocation, and also they hire people that have extremely high slopes in terms of their rate of learning. One thing that is atypical about their talent or their hiring process is that they just have a base salary. There's no bonus incentives, there are no equity incentives. And the reason that the CEO gives is that they just found that these bonus and incentive plans don't actually work that well. I suspect it's because of their fluid resource allocation. If you're constantly being moved to different companies and different teams, it's a lot harder to optimize for hitting a certain revenue output. Sometimes what you as an individual want is to increase revenue of this specific business line because that's tied to your bonus, but actually what's best for the company or Bending Spoons as a whole is for you to be redeployed to a different part of the organization and a totally different part of the company. So to summarize what we've talked about, we talked about how Bending Spoons actually focuses on the 1 to N part of the startup journey and not the 0 to 1 part. And they focus on being an operator, not just a financier, and how they think about talent and their platform. Talent is not just an outsourced function to HR or recruiting, but actually is a core product. And their platform has a lot of proprietary technology that's built specific to them so that they can accelerate the growth of these businesses. So those were the 4 things that helped the Bending Spoons model continue to hum. But if you actually wanted to emulate the Bending Spoons model, what would you do? I think the first thing that you would do is realize that the company is the product, and basically your ability to take companies and transform them, or basically you're a company to find businesses, buy them, and then transform them. That is the product. So it's more like a process rather than a specific product itself. The second is talent. Talent is a core product of the Bending Spoons model. And if you can find a way to get underpriced talent or an area where you can monopolize talent, that is extremely useful. The third is you want to be an operator and not a financier. Yes, Bending Spoons does do deals and they do buy companies, but they're primarily not a financier. They're not trying to structure these agreements in a complicated way. They're not trying to pay the cheapest possible price. What they're trying to do is find fairly priced assets and then increase the quality and the revenue of these businesses. And the final thing is to embrace the long, painful slog. We're hearing about Bending Spoons now because they've been acquiring companies like AOL and Vimeo, but actually they've been at this for at least 12 years. And for many of those 12 years, we didn't hear about them. And it's only now that they've reached a certain scale that we do. And so compounding takes a long time. And so if you're going to do this, it's worth being prepared for this to take at least a decade, if not longer.